Khartoum is slowly coming back to life, at least officially. Sudan's Prime Minister Camille Idris has announced this Sunday that the government has returned to the capital after nearly 3 years in exile in Port Sudan, following the deadly showdown between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces. Now, the city's streets, which were once front lines, are still scarred. You can see it in these images: homes destroyed, services barely working, and makeshift cemeteries dotting neighborhoods. Idris has promised better services for residents, but the UN warns it's going to take at least $350 million to repair essential infrastructure. And while Kama's return to the capital, fighting continues elsewhere in Sudan, and millions of people remain displaced, facing one of the world's largest humanitarian crises. Joining us to unpack the return of Sudan's government is Ambassador Michael Sahlin, a former Swedish envoy to Sudan. How significant is the government's return to Khartoum in terms of stabilizing the capital and restoring state authority?
Well, it's a step. It doesn't solve much in the situation in the country as a whole, I'm afraid, but still it's a step, because to have a capital and to be able to start restoring basic services to the population. I think 1 million or so have returned to Khartoum since the recovery of it by SAF. So it's a step, but it doesn't indicate much concerning the situation in the country as a whole. It's still a terrible civil war going on.
What are the biggest challenges that the government faces right now in rebuilding infrastructure and restoring essential services after years of urban warfare?
Yeah, it's an enormous. We're talking about the capital only now, not the country as a whole, obviously. And I mean, the buildings are erased, no services functioning. So it will be years and years before meaningful services have been restored, even if there were to be a massive international assistance program helping the government. By the way, when we say government, it is the SAF, the army, and its civilian arm. There is another government in Sudan, also controlled by RSF, and they too have a government. So unfortunately, the situation is such that the country is very divided and leaning towards partition, some say. But concerning the part that is controlled by SAF and its government, it's a small step for mankind, trying to rebuild the capital. It's an incredible task.
You know, as the government moves into Khartoum and the RSF moves into Darfur, are we likely going to see any moves to unify the country, or are we seeing another partition, essentially?
Well, what I see is a continuing trend towards what might, in the end, for all the resistance internationally, be a de facto partition, like in Libya, you might say, and there are some other countries that are leaning towards that as a solution. But as long as both sides of the civil war and all the mercenaries that are employed by the two sides and all the other interested parties keep saying that there is no way we would accept a ceasefire, we need to be victorious in the civil war before we can start discussing really settling matters. Then that is a recipe for the civil war continuing.
All right. You know, I think the final question that I just want to ask you is that Sudan sometimes makes it into international headlines. You know, you could say maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, we saw it being covered more widely in Western media as well. Again, international headlines have fallen silent when it comes to Sudan, despite a continuing mass humanitarian crisis in the country. What has changed, if anything?
Well, not much other than that, and you can compare with Gaza, and the world seems to have forgotten Gaza as well, in the competition now from Iran and from all the other crises all over. Well, the change now compared to a couple of months ago is that the U.S. seems to have, again, deprioritized its commitment to trying to to do something about it. Many would say that in view of the leverage that only the U.S. has vis-a-vis countries that, I'm talking about neighboring countries now, UAE and others, that are supportive or facilitating the support of others for the war to continue without the very strong commitment from the U.S. There is no one else having the kind of leverage that would be needed to make the players here accept to end this war. And what I read is that there was a degree of commitment some time ago when MBS from Saudi Arabia asked Trump to make some big difference over Sudan, and it was accepted, and the U.S. did reprioritize Sudan for a while. And since what was proposed then was refused, first by SAF's leader Al-Burhan, who kept saying that I will not accept the 3 months ceasefire proposal by the U.S. and its partners in the Quad, so-called grouping of countries. And then at that time, RSF said that we accept a unilateral ceasefire, knowing that the other side hadn't accepted it. So no side has really accepted not to try to continue to try to win the war rather than accept compromise. And that's where we are now.
All right,
and people
Ambassador.
are suffering terribly, terribly, terribly.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to thank you so much, as per usual, for joining us to keep this in the headlines.